"Don't you dare touch me." The scream tore through the pristine silence of the $50 million penthouse like a knife through silk. Sofia Martinez stood soaking wet in the middle of the marble-floored living room, her black uniform dress clinging to her trembling frame, clutching an empty bottle of 1982 Chateau Latour. $10,000 worth of wine now dripping crimson from the dark hair of Alexander Blackwood, the most powerful man in Manhattan. The billionaire CEO stood frozen, his perfectly tailored Armani suit staining burgundy droplets falling from his chiseled jaw onto the Persian rug worth more than most people's annual salary. His ice-blue eyes, usually as cold and calculating as a winter storm, held something Sophia had never seen before: surprise. Raw, unguarded surprise. "What did you just do?" His voice was deadly quiet, the kind of calm that preceded earthquakes. "Something nobody else has ever had the courage to do: treat you exactly the way you treat everyone else." Sophia's chest heaved with fury, her brown eyes blazing with a fire that made her look like an avenging angel, despite her modest height and circumstances. The wine bottle slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble with a sound that seemed to echo through the cavernous space. Neither of them moved. The tension crackled between them like electricity before a thunderstorm. 6 months earlier, Sofia Martinez had been 3 months away from graduating Stanford University with a degree in economics summa cum laude, her future bright as the California sunshine. She'd worked 3 jobs throughout college, slept 4 hours a night, lived on ramen noodles and sheer determination, all to escape the cycle of poverty that had claimed her father's life in a construction accident when she was 12. Then came the phone call that shattered everything. "Sophia, mi amor, you need to come home." Her mother's voice had been barely a whisper, fragile as tissue paper. "The doctors, they say I have cancer, stage 4. The world had tilted on its axis. Within 24 hours, Sophia had withdrawn from Stanford, packed her entire life into 2 suitcases, and returned to the cramped apartment in Queens where she'd grown up. The medical bills had started immediately, a crushing avalanche of numbers that made her student loans look like pocket change. That's how Sofia Martinez, who should have been analyzing market trends in a corner office somewhere, ended up scrubbing toilets for Manhattan's elite through elite domestic services. It was honest work, she told herself, even when clients treated her like she was invisible, or worse, like she was something dirty they'd rather not acknowledge. But Alexander Blackwood was different. He didn't just ignore her, he seemed to take pleasure in reminding her of her place. The morning had started like any other in the Blackwood penthouse. Sophia had arrived at 6 a.m. sharp, using her key card to access the private elevator that whisked her up 60 floors above the city. The apartment was a monument to wealth and isolation: 20,000 square feet of cold perfection, all steel and glass, and sharp edges without a single photograph or a personal touch to suggest a human being actually lived there. She'd been polishing the imported Italian marble in the master bathroom when she'd overheard the phone call that changed everything. "Fire them all," Alexander's voice had carried from his home office, crisp and emotionless as always. "I don't care about the severance packages. 500 people effective immediately. Stock price is more important than sentiment." Sophia had frozen her cleaning cloth hovering over the sink. 500 families. 500 people who would go home tonight and have to explain to their children why daddy or mommy wouldn't be going to work anymore. 500 people just like her mother, just like herself, people for whom a paycheck meant the difference between survival and catastrophe. She'd continued working her movements mechanical until she'd heard footsteps in the hallway. Alexander had appeared in the bathroom doorway, his presence filling the space like a storm cloud. At 28, he was devastatingly handsome in the way that only extreme wealth could polish: 6 feet 2 inches of lean muscle wrapped in custom suits. Dark hair always perfectly styled, those piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through people. "You're new," he'd said, not really a question. 2 weeks, Sophia had replied, not looking up from her work. The last girl lasted 3 days. Before that, 1 week. "Do you know why?" Something in his tone had made her look up. He'd been studying her with the same intensity he probably used to analyze quarterly reports. "No, sir." "Because they were incompetent. They moved things around, made noise, acted like they belonged here." His eyes had traveled over her face, lingering in a way that made her skin crawl. "You're smarter than that, aren't you?" The condescension in his voice had hit her like a physical blow. This was a man who had probably never worried about where his next meal was coming from, never had to choose between textbooks and groceries, never had to watch a parent waste away, because quality health care was a luxury they couldn't afford. "Yes, sir," she'd managed through gritted teeth. "Good. See that it stays that way." He'd started to turn away, dismissing her like she was nothing when Sophia had done something that surprised them both. "Mr. Blackwood?" He'd paused, eyebrow raised in surprise that she dared to speak. "Those 500 people you just fired, do you ever think about their families?" The temperature in the room had seemed to drop 10 degrees. Alexander had turned slowly, his expression shifting from surprise to something dangerous. "Excuse me, I heard your phone call. 500 people losing their jobs. That's 500 families who won't be able to pay rent next month, won't be able to buy groceries, won't be able to... Are you lecturing me about business?" His voice had been silk over steel. "I'm asking if you ever think about the human cost of your decisions." The human cost? He'd stepped closer, and Sophia had caught a hint of his cologne, something expensive and masculine that probably cost more than her monthly salary. "Let me explain something to you, Miss Martinez. Miss Martinez, I didn't build a multi-billion-dollar empire by concerning myself with the feelings of people who can't perform their jobs adequately. If they wanted job security, they should have made themselves indispensable. Like you did." The words had slipped out before she could stop them. Alexander's eyes had flashed dangerously. "What did you say?" "Nothing, sir. I apologize." But it had been too late. Something had shifted in his expression, a predatory gleam that made her pulse quicken with alarm. "No, please. Continue. I'm fascinated by your perspective on business strategy. Tell me, what exactly do you think I should have done? Keep incompetent employees out of the goodness of my heart? Run my company into the ground so that everyone can feel good about themselves?" His voice had been getting closer, and Sophia had realized he'd been backing her toward the wall. She'd lifted her chin defiantly, refusing to show fear. "I think you could try treating people like human beings instead of disposable resources." "Human beings?" He'd laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. "You mean like you, a college dropout who cleans toilets for a living?" The words had hit her like a slap. Heat had flooded her cheeks, shame and rage warring in her chest. "How dare you? How dare I? What, tell the truth, you're here because you couldn't cut it in the real world. You're here because you failed at everything else, and this is all you're good for." That's when Sophia had snapped. The wine bottle had been sitting on the counter, a vintage Alexander had been saving for some special occasion. Without thinking, without hesitation, she'd grabbed it and upended the entire thing over his perfectly styled head. Which brought them to this moment, both of them dripping wine and staring at each other across a gulf that seemed wider than the Grand Canyon. Alexander raised one hand, slowly wiping wine from his eyes. When he spoke, his voice was eerily calm. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? Probably gotten myself fired and possibly arrested?" Sophia replied, her bravado finally starting to crumble as the reality of her actions sank in. "That wine was worth more than you make in 6 months." "Then maybe you shouldn't have been such an ass." A sound echoed through the penthouse, footsteps running down the hallway. Security, no doubt alerted by some silent alarm. Sophia closed her eyes, preparing for the inevitable. She'd lost her temper, lost her job, and now she'd probably lose her freedom too. How was she going to take care of her mother from a jail cell? But instead of calling for security, instead of reaching for his phone, Alexander Blackwood did something completely unexpected. He laughed. It started as a low chuckle deep in his chest, then grew into something richer, more genuine than anything she'd heard from him before. The sound transformed his entire face, erasing the cold mask he usually wore, and revealing someone younger, more human underneath. "Sir," a security guard appeared in the doorway, hand on his radio. "We heard..." Alexander held up a hand, never taking his eyes off Sophia. "False alarm, Marcus. Everything's fine here. But sir, the mess, I'll handle it. Please return to your post." The guard hesitated, clearly confused by his employer's wine-soaked appearance and inexplicably good mood, but he obeyed. His footsteps faded down the hallway, leaving them alone once again. Alexander stepped closer, close enough that Sophia could see the wine droplets clinging to his dark eyelashes. could smell the intoxicating mixture of expensive cologne and vintage wine that now surrounded him. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "You know my name. You just said it. Your first name. Sophia." He said it slowly like he was testing how it felt on his tongue. "Sophia Martinez. Stanford dropout. Economics major, if I had to guess from your little lecture about human resources." Her eyes widened. "How did you—" "I make it my business to know everything about the people who work for me. What I want to know is why someone with your intelligence is scrubbing my bathroom instead of running her own company." The question hit too close to home. Sophia felt her throat tighten with emotions she couldn't afford to show. "That's none of your business. Isn't it? You just assaulted me with a $10,000 bottle of wine. I think that makes your motivations very much my business. Are you going to have me arrested?" Alexander studied her face for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "That depends. On what? On whether you're going to do it again." Despite everything, the fear, the anger, the crushing weight of her circumstances, Sophia felt her lips twitch with the ghost of a smile. "That depends. Acting on what? On whether you're going to be an ass again." This time his laugh was full and rich, filling the sterile space with warmth. "Fair enough." He gestured toward the mess on the floor. "Clean this up." And Sophia, she looked up at him, surprised by the way her name sounded in his voice, like he was tasting something sweet. "Don't ever let anyone tell you you're not good enough. Anyone who fights that hard for strangers has more character than most people I know." As he walked away, leaving her alone with the broken glass and spreading wine stain, Sophia realized something had fundamentally shifted. The game had changed, though she wasn't sure yet what the new rules were. What she did know was that Alexander Blackwood was nothing like she'd expected. Behind that cold exterior was something else, something dangerous and magnetic and completely unpredictable. And that terrified her more than his anger ever could. 3 days had passed since the wine incident, and Sophia Martinez was still employed. This fact amazed everyone at Elite Domestic Services, including herself. When she'd reported to work the next morning, certain she'd find her key card deactivated, and a termination notice waiting, Alexander Blackwood had instead left her a single note on the kitchen counter. "Use the Waterford crystal for cleaning supplies. It's more your speed. AB." The note had been accompanied by a bottle of premium glass cleaner that cost more than her weekly grocery budget. Sophia had stared at the note for a full 5 minutes, trying to decode whether it was an insult, a joke, or something else entirely. With Alexander Blackwood, she was learning nothing was ever straightforward. Now, as she polished the floor-to-ceiling windows of his home office, she could hear him on another conference call, his voice, carrying that same cold authority that had made her snap 3 days ago. But something was different. Every few minutes she'd catch him glancing in her direction, his ice-blue eyes studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. "The quarterly projections are unacceptable," he was saying into his headset, pacing behind his massive glass desk like a caged predator. "I want new numbers on my desk by 5 or heads are going to roll." Sophia's hand tightened on her cleaning cloth. More people's jobs on the line, more families who would suffer for the sake of shareholder profits. She forced herself to focus on her work to ignore the familiar surge of anger that threatened to spill over again. "Sir," Marcus, the head of security, appeared in the doorway. "There's a woman here to see you. Says she's from Stanford University." Alexander's pacing stopped abruptly. "Send her up." Sophia's blood turned to ice. Stanford. There was only one reason someone from her former university would be here, and it had everything to do with her unfinished degree and the scholarship money she'd had to forfeit when she dropped out. Money that the university would now want back, money she didn't have. Sophia Martinez. A crisp voice behind her made her turn around. A woman in an expensive business suit stood in the doorway, her blonde hair pulled back in a perfect chignon, her smile as sharp as a blade. "I'm Dr. Catherine Westbrook from Stanford's Alumni Relations Department. What are you doing here?" Sophia's voice came out as barely a whisper. "That's what I'd like to know," Alexander said, ending his call and removing his headset. His gaze moved between the two women with predatory interest. "Dr. Westbrook wasn't it. To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Actually, Mr. Blackwood, I'm here about Miss Martinez. She was one of our most promising students before she—" left us. The woman's tone suggested that Sophia's departure had been a personal affront. There are some financial matters we need to discuss. Financial matters? Alexander's voice had gone dangerously quiet. Scholarship obligations that weren't fulfilled due to her early departure. We've been trying to reach Miss Martinez for months, but she seems to have disappeared into the service industry. The contempt in the woman's voice was unmistakable. Sophia felt heat flood her cheeks, shame and rage warring in her chest. She'd known this day would come, but having it happen here in front of Alexander made it 1,000 times worse. How much? Alexander asked. Excuse me, how much does she owe? Mr. Blackwood, this really isn't your concern. Everything that happens in my home is my concern. How much? Dr. Westbrook hesitated, clearly thrown off balance by his intensity. $47,000 plus accrued interest. But as I said, this is between the university and Miss Martinez. No, Sophia said suddenly, her voice stronger than she felt. This is between me and Stanford. I'll handle it. With what money? Dr. Westbrook's laugh was crystalline and cruel. You're a maid, dear. Do you have any idea how long it would take you to pay back that kind of debt on your current salary? That's enough. Alexander's voice cut through the air like a whip. I think this conversation is over. But we haven't resolved. Yes, we have. Marcus will escort you out. Dr. Westbrook's composed mask slipped for a moment, revealing her surprise at being dismissed so abruptly. Mr. Blackwood, surely you understand the university's position. I understand perfectly, and I understand that you have exactly 30 seconds to leave my property before I have you removed for harassment. The threat was delivered in the same conversational tone he might use to discuss the weather, but there was steel underneath it. Dr. Westbrook gathered her dignity around her like armor and swept from the room, her heels clicking angrily against the marble floor. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia stood frozen by the window, her cleaning cloth forgotten in her hands, unable to meet Alexander's gaze. $47,000, he said finally. I don't want to talk about it. Stanford economics, summa cum laude track, I'm guessing. Full scholarship that you forfeited when you dropped out. His voice was thoughtful, analytical. The question is why? I said I don't want to talk about it. And the question is why, he repeated, ignoring her protest. Someone doesn't walk away from Stanford 3 months before graduation unless something catastrophic happened. Sophia finally turned to face him, her eyes blazing. You want to know why? Fine. My mother is dying, cancer, stage 4. The medical bills started the day she was diagnosed, and they haven't stopped since. I had a choice: finish my degree and watch her die alone, or come home and spend whatever time she has left taking care of her. It wasn't really a choice at all. The words hung in the air between them like broken glass. Alexander's expression had shifted, the predatory gleam replaced by something that might have been understanding. Why didn't you take out loans? I tried. Do you know what happens when you're the daughter of undocumented immigrants? When you have no credit history, no collateral, no family wealth to fall back on? Banks don't exactly line up to help people like me. So you threw away your future. I chose my mother over money. Some of us actually care about family. The barb hit home. Alexander's jaw tightened, and for a moment she saw something raw and vulnerable flash across his features before the mask slammed back into place. That was unnecessarily cruel. Was it you? Fire 500 people without blinking, lecture me about making myself indispensable, act like caring about other people is a weakness. When exactly did you become so cold? When I learned that caring about people only leads to disappointment. What happened to you? The question slipped out before she could stop it, her voice softer, now almost gentle. For a moment she thought he might actually answer. His guard seemed to drop, revealing glimpses of someone younger, more broken underneath the polished exterior. But then his phone rang, shattering the moment like glass. Blackwood, he answered curtly. As he listened to whoever was on the other end, his expression grew darker. When how bad? I'll be right there. He ended the call and grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. I have to go. There's been an accident at one of my construction sites. Is anyone hurt? Alexander paused at the door, surprised by her concern. 3 workers. They're being taken to Mount Sinai. The same hospital where your mother is. The words were out before Sophia could think better of them. He turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. How do you know about my mother? Sophia felt her cheeks burn. I, the newspaper articles about your family. When I was researching the company before I started working here, I know she died when you were young. Researching? His voice was flat and motionless. Of course. It wasn't like that, wasn't it? How thorough was your research, Miss Martinez? Did you also discover that my mother died in a car accident caused by a drunk driver who got 6 months in county jail because his family had connections? Did you learn that I was supposed to be in that car, but stayed late at school for debate practice instead? The pain in his voice was like a physical blow. Alexander, did your research tell you that I was 14 years old and I blame myself for her death for years? Because if I'd been there, maybe I could have convinced her to take a different route, leave 5 minutes earlier, anything that might have changed the outcome. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. Don't. His voice was sharp again, the vulnerability locked away. Don't apologize for things that aren't your fault. And don't pretend to understand my choices when you know nothing about the price of caring too much. He left without another word, leaving Sophia alone in the vast office, with her guilt and a dozen new questions about the man who employed her. When Alexander returned 4 hours later, he looked exhausted. His expensive suit was rumpled, his usually perfect hair disheveled, and there were coffee stains on his white shirt. Sophia was in the kitchen preparing dinner. She wasn't sure he'd eat another one of her unofficial duties that had somehow evolved beyond her job description. How are they? She asked without turning around. The workers. They'll live. 2 broken legs, 1 concussion, several stitches. Could have been much worse. That's good. Is it? Alexander's voice was bitter. They're all temporary contractors with minimal insurance. Medical bills will probably bankrupt them, assuming they can even work again. Sophia turned to face him, surprised by the guilt in his voice. That's not your fault. Isn't it my company, my construction site, my safety protocols that weren't good enough? Accidents happen. Do they? Or do they happen because I cut corners to save money? Because I prioritize profit margins over worker safety? Because I'm exactly the kind of heartless bastard you think I am? The anguish in his voice was raw, unguarded. This wasn't the cold, calculating CEO she'd come to know. This was someone drowning in self-doubt and guilt, someone who cared far more than he wanted to admit. What are you going to do? What I should have done from the beginning. Full medical coverage, salary continuation during recovery, job guarantees when they're ready to return. He ran a hand through his hair, destroying what remained of his perfect styling. It'll cost the company close to $1 million. And the board will hate you for it. Probably. But you're going to do it anyway. Yes. Sophia studied his face, trying to reconcile this man with the one who'd fired 500 people 3 days ago. Why? Because someone very annoying recently reminded me that people aren't disposable resources. His eyes met hers across the kitchen, and something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition of common ground they'd both been too proud to acknowledge. I'm not annoying, Sophia protested, but her lips were twitching with the ghost of a smile. You're incredibly annoying. You ask inconvenient questions, you challenge everything I say, and you have absolutely no respect for authority. Is that a complaint? No, Alexander said quietly. It's an observation, and possibly the first honest thing anyone has said to me in years. The admission hung in the air between them, fragile and electric. Sophia felt something shift in her chest, a dangerous warmth that had nothing to do with the kitchen's heat and everything to do with the way Alexander was looking at her, like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve, like she mattered. I should go, she said suddenly, alarmed by her own reaction. It's late. It's barely 7. I know, but I need to get to the hospital. Visiting hours end at 9. Alexander's expression softened. How is she, your mother? The question was gentle, careful, and it nearly undid her. Some days are better than others. Today was not one of the better ones. The treatment isn't working. The treatment is working. It's just... Sophia's voice caught, and she had to take a breath before continuing. It's killing her almost as fast as the cancer is. She's so weak, so tired. Sometimes I wonder if we're fighting for her life or just prolonging her suffering. She's lucky to have you. Is she? Because sometimes I think I'm being selfish keeping her here when she's in so much pain making her fight because I'm not ready to let go. That's not selfish. That's love. The words were spoken so simply, so matter-of-factly, that they hit her like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had validated her choices instead of questioning them? When was the last time someone had seen her struggle and called it love instead of obligation? I should really go, she repeated, but she didn't move. I'll drive you. That's not necessary. It's past 7. The subway will be crowded and you'll spend an hour getting there. I can have you at the hospital in 20 minutes. Why would you do that? Alexander was quiet for a long moment, studying her face with that intense focus that made her feel like he could see straight through her. Because, he said finally, I'm beginning to think I've been wrong about a lot of things, and I'd like the chance to get at least one thing right. 20 minutes later, Sophia found herself in the passenger seat of a McLaren that cost more than most people's houses, watching the city blur past in streaks of light and shadow. Alexander drove with the same focused intensity he brought to everything else, his hands steady on the wheel, his profile sharp and beautiful in the dashboard's glow. You don't have to come up, she said as they pulled into the hospital parking garage. I'll wait. It could be hours. I have nowhere else to be. Hantum. The simple honesty of the statement made her chest tighten with emotion she couldn't name. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I might be a complete disaster at this whole human decency thing. Despite everything, the fear, the exhaustion, the constant weight of worry, Sophia found herself laughing. Well, you're off to a promising start. As she walked toward the hospital entrance, she could feel Alexander's eyes on her, could sense something fundamental shifting between them. The battle lines they'd drawn 3 days ago were blurring, revealing common ground neither of them had expected to find. What she didn't know was that Alexander Blackwood was sitting in his car, staring after her, feeling something he hadn't experienced in years, the terrifying, exhilarating possibility that he might be falling for someone who could see past his carefully constructed walls to the man he'd forgotten he could be. Sophia emerged from Mount Sinai Hospital at 11:30 p.m., emotionally drained and physically exhausted. Her mother had been having one of her bad days, the kind where the pain medication barely touched the edges of her suffering, where every breath seemed like a monumental effort. They'd sat together in silence, mostly Sophia holding her mother's frail hand, while machines beeped and hummed around them, marking time in a language only the dying seemed to understand. She was surprised to find Alexander's McLaren still idling in the parking spot where she'd left him 3 hours ago. Through the tinted windshield, she could see him on his phone, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. He looked up as she approached, immediately ending his call and getting out to open her door. You didn't have to wait, she said, though privately, she was grateful beyond words. The thought of navigating the subway system at this hour alone with her grief and exhaustion had been almost unbearable. How is she? Alexander asked as they pulled out of the parking garage. Tired, in pain, fighting. Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. The doctors say the chemotherapy is working, but some days it's hard to believe that. Some days it feels like we're torturing her in the name of hope. Alexander was quiet for several blocks, navigating the late-night Manhattan traffic with practiced ease. Finally, he spoke. My mother used to say that hope was the cruelest gift the gods gave humans. Too little and you give up. Too much and you destroy yourself reaching for something that might not exist. Do you believe that? I used to. Now, I'm not sure what I believe anymore. There was something in his voice, a vulnerability that made Sophia study his profile in the dashboard's glow. What changed your mind? You. The word hung in the air between them like a confession. Sophia felt her breath catch her heart doing something complicated against her ribs. I don't understand. 3 days ago, you looked at me and saw someone worth saving. Even when I was at my absolute worst, even when I was being deliberately cruel, you fought for the humanity you thought was still there. Alexander's hands tightened on the steering wheel. No one has done that for me in a very long time. Alexander, I've been thinking about what you said, about treating people like disposable resources, about the human cost of my decisions. He glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the road. You were right about all of it. They were stopped at a red light now, the city pulsing around them in neon and shadow. Sophia could feel the weight of his attention, even though he wasn't looking at her, could sense something shifting between them, like the air before a storm. I'm not a good person, Sophia. I've made choices, done things. I'm not the hero in anyone's story. Maybe not, but that doesn't mean you can't be. The light turned green, but Alexander didn't move immediately. When he finally pressed the accelerator, his voice was rough with something that might have been emotion. You have entirely too much faith in people. My mother always said that faith wasn't about what people were, but what they could become. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She is. Was. Still is, I guess. Sophia's voice caught on the words. It's hard to know what tense to use when someone is dying slowly. Alexander pulled into the parking garage of his building, but instead of heading for the penthouse elevator, he led her to a different bank of elevators she'd never seen before. Where are we going? Somewhere I probably shouldn't take you, he said quietly, but somewhere I want to. The elevator climbed past the penthouse, past floors Sophia didn't know existed, until it opened onto what could only be described as a private rooftop garden. The space was breathtaking, a green oasis 65 stories above the city, complete with mature trees, flowering shrubs, and a stunning view of Manhattan's glittering skyline. This is incredible, Sophia breathed, stepping out onto the carefully maintained pathways. My mother designed it, Alexander said, his voice carefully neutral. She always said that living so high above the world made you forget what it felt like to have roots. She wanted to create a place where something could grow. Sophia could see why his mother had chosen this space. Despite being surrounded by skyscrapers and urban chaos, the garden felt peaceful, almost sacred. She could imagine a young Alexander playing here, could picture his mother tending to the plants with careful, loving hands. Do you come here often? This is actually the first time I've been up here since she died. The admission hit her like a physical blow. Alexander, if this is too, it is, but I want to be here, with you. He moved to stand beside her at the garden's edge, where a glass barrier provided safety without obstructing the view. I've spent 15 years avoiding this place because it reminded me of everything I'd lost. But tonight it reminds me of everything I might still be able to find. The city spread out below them like a circuit board, millions of lights twinkling in the darkness. From this height, the people below were invisible, but Sophia found herself thinking about them anyway. All those lives intersecting and diverging, all those stories of love and loss and hope playing out in windows she couldn't see. Thank you, she said quietly, for bringing me here, for waiting tonight, for everything. Don't thank me yet. I'm about to do something that's either very stupid or very necessary, and I'm not sure which. Before she could ask what he meant, Alexander had turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to frame her face with a gentleness that took her breath away. His thumbs traced along her cheekbones, his touch soft as a whisper. I can't stop thinking about you, he said, his voice rough with honesty. The way you look at the world, the way you fight for what you believe in, the way you see something worth saving in broken people like me. I can't stop thinking about the way you felt in my arms when I caught you from falling yesterday, or the way you smell like vanilla and something uniquely you. Alexander, I know this is complicated. I know I'm your employer, and you need this job, and there are 1,000 reasons why this is a terrible idea. But Sophia, I am falling for you so hard and so fast that I can barely breathe, and I need you to know that before I lose my nerve. The confession hung between them like a bridge. Neither of them was sure they should cross. Sophia could feel her heart hammering against her ribs, could feel the warmth of his hands on her face, could smell his cologne, mixed with something uniquely him that made her want to lean closer. This is crazy, she whispered. Completely insane, he agreed. I work for you. Minor detail. You're a billionaire. I'm a maid. You're a Stanford economics student who could probably run circles around half my board of directors. You're brilliant and brave and beautiful, and the fact that you're temporarily working as my housekeeper doesn't change any of that. Temporarily? Did you really think I was going to let you waste your potential cleaning houses forever? I've already made some calls. Sophia pulled back, slightly, alarm flaring in her chest. What kind of calls? The kind that gets Stanford dropout students back into their final semester with full financial aid and medical leave extensions for family emergencies. She stared at him, speechless. You can't just, I can. I did. You have a meeting with the dean next week if you want it. Why would you do that? Because you deserve to finish what you started. Because your mother deserves to see you graduate. Because the world needs more people like you in positions where they can actually make a difference. Tears were threatening now, hot and overwhelming. I can't accept that. It's too much. It's not charity, Sophia. It's an investment. In you and your future, in the kind of person I believe you can become. His voice softened. Besides, I'm not entirely altruistic. I have a vested interest in making sure you stick around. Alexander, I know I'm asking for something I have no right to ask for. I know the timing is terrible, and the circumstances are impossible, and I'm probably the last person you should trust with your heart. But I'm asking anyway because for the first time in 15 years, I want something more than money or power or revenge. I want you. The words were raw, honest, stripped of all pretense. Standing there in his mother's garden with the city spread out below them, like a glittering tapestry, Sophia felt something inside her chest crack open. Something she'd been holding tightly closed since the day she'd gotten the call about her mother's diagnosis. This is terrifying, she admitted. The best things usually are. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be someone's girlfriend when I can barely keep my own life together. Then we'll figure it out together. One day at a time, one crisis at a time, one small victory at a time. The gentleness in his voice was her undoing. Without fully conscious thought, she rose on her toes and kissed him soft and tentative at first, then, with growing certainty, as he responded with a hunger that matched her own. He tasted like coffee, and promise like possibility, and hope like everything she'd been afraid to want. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes? That's a yes to trying? A yes to seeing where this goes? A yes to being terrified out of my mind and doing it anyway? His smile was radiant, transforming his entire face. I can work with that. They stood there for a long time, holding each other in the garden his mother had created, the city lights twinkling below them like fallen stars. For the first time in months, Sophia allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, something good was about to happen. What she didn't know was that 3 blocks away, a photographer with a telephoto lens was uploading photos to his computer photos of Manhattan's most eligible bachelor kissing his maid on a rooftop garden, photos that would change everything by morning. What she didn't know was that Victoria Ashford, Alexander's former fiancée and the daughter of New York's governor, was already planning her return to the city armed with family connections and a ruthless determination to reclaim what she considered rightfully hers. What she didn't know was that the fairy tale was about to become a nightmare, and that everything she'd just allowed herself to hope for was about to be tested in ways that would either destroy them both or forge them into something unbreakable. But for now, in this moment, with Alexander's arms around her and the world spread out below them like a promise, Sophia Martinez allowed herself to believe in happy endings. It was a luxury she wouldn't have for much longer. Sophia woke up to the sound of her phone ringing at 6 a.m. Not the gentle chime of her alarm, but the insistent, jarring ring of an incoming call. She fumbled for the device on her nightstand, squinting at the caller ID through sleep-blurred eyes. Elena Rodriguez, her mother's nurse at Mount Sinai. Ice flooded Sophia's veins as she answered. Hello. Sophia, honey, you need to get down here. Your mother, she took a turn during the night. She's asking for you. The phone slipped from Sophia's nerveless fingers, clattering to the floor. This was it. The call she'd been dreading the moment she'd known was coming, but had prayed would stay in some distant theoretical future. She was dressed and out the door in 10 minutes, her hands shaking so badly she could barely manage to call a cab. It wasn't until she was halfway to the hospital that she remembered she had Alexander's number now, that she didn't have to face this alone. But even as she reached for her phone, pride held her back. This was her crisis, her family, her responsibility. She couldn't start depending on him now, not when everything was so new and fragile between them. The hospital corridor seemed endless as she ran toward the oncology ward, her sneakers squeaking against the polished floors. Elena met her outside her mother's room, her expression grave but kind. She's stable for now, the nurse said gently. But Sophia, honey, you should know. The doctors think it's time to start thinking about comfort care. The treatment isn't working anymore. The words hit her like a physical blow. Comfort care. A euphemism for giving up, for letting go, for accepting the unacceptable. How long? Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. Weeks, maybe a month if we're lucky. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Sophia pushed past the nurse into her mother's room, where Maria Martinez lay propped up against white pillows, her once vibrant face gaunt and pale, her breathing labored. But her dark eyes were alert, and they lit up when she saw her daughter. Mija, her mother whispered, reaching out with a hand that felt like tissue paper. Come here. Sophia sank into the chair beside the bed, taking her mother's hand in both of hers. Mama, I'm here. I'm right here. I know, baby. I know you are. Maria's voice was weak but steady. We need to talk, you and I, about what comes next. Don't. Please don't talk like that. Sophia, look at me. Her mother's grip was surprisingly strong. I'm tired, Mija. So tired. And I need to know that you're going to be okay when I can't fight anymore. Tears were streaming down Sophia's face, now hot and relentless. I can't do this without you. Yes, you can. You're the strongest person I know. You gave up Stanford for me, gave up your dreams. I didn't give them up. I chose you. And now I'm choosing you. Maria's voice was fierce despite its fragility. I want you to go back to school. I want you to finish what you started. I want you to build the life you deserve. Mama, one, promise me, Sophia. Promise me you won't waste your life grieving for me. Promise me you'll let yourself be happy. The conversation continued for 2 hours, mother and daughter holding hands and making plans for a future only one of them would see. By the time Sophia left the hospital, she felt hollowed out, scraped raw, like someone had reached inside her chest and rearranged everything. She took the subway back to Manhattan, needing the time to compose herself before facing Alexander. But when she emerged from the station near his building, she was confronted by a scene that stopped her cold. Reporters. Dozens of them crowded around the entrance to Alexander's building, cameras, flashing voices shouting questions over each other. And standing in the middle of it all, holding court like she owned the sidewalk, was the most beautiful woman Sophia had ever seen. Victoria Ashford was tall and willowy, with platinum blonde hair that caught the morning light like spun gold, and legs that seemed to go on forever beneath a perfectly tailored white dress that probably cost more than Sophia's annual salary. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in the world, never wondered if she belonged, never had to fight for anything she wanted. I'm not here to cause drama, Victoria was saying to the reporters, her voice carrying easily over the crowd. I'm simply here to support Alexander during what must be a very difficult time for him. When someone you care about is being taken advantage of, you don't just stand by and do nothing. Miss Ashford, are you saying Mr. Blackwood is being manipulated? One reporter called out. Victoria's smile was razor sharp. I'm saying that when a man like Alexander suddenly starts making uncharacteristic decisions, spending company money on questionable charity cases, associating with people far beneath his social station, well, it raises questions about his judgment, doesn't it? Sophia's blood turned to ice. They were talking about her, about Alexander's decision to help the injured construction workers, about his offer to help her return to Stanford. Somehow Victoria knew everything. There are photos, another reporter was saying. Pictures of Mr. Blackwood with an employee apparently in a romantic situation. Can you comment on that? I think it, Victoria said delicately, that Alexander has always had a compassionate nature. Sometimes that compassion can be misinterpreted by people who see an opportunity to improve their circumstances. But I have faith that he'll see through any manipulation and make the right choice. The implication was crystal clear. Sophia was a gold digger, a manipulator, someone who had seduced Alexander for money and status. The narrative was already being written, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She turned and fled, ignoring the reporters who spotted her and shouted questions at her retreating figure. By the time she reached the service entrance of Alexander's building, she was shaking with a combination of grief, rage, and something that felt dangerously close to despair. Marcus, the security guard, took one look at her face and ushered her quickly into the service elevator. Miss Martinez, are you all right? Mr. Blackwood has been trying to reach you all morning. I'm fine, she lied. Just a family emergency. But when the elevator doors opened on Alexander's penthouse, she found him pacing the living room like a caged animal, his phone pressed to his ear, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. "I don't care what it costs," he was saying. "Find out who took those photos and who's paying them. And get me a meeting with Victoria's father. Today." He looked up as Sophia entered, relief flooding his features. "I have to go," he said into the phone, ending the call immediately. "Sophia, thank God. I've been calling you for hours. Are you all right? Where have you been?" "The hospital," she said quietly. "My mother. She's dying, Alexander. Really dying this time. Weeks, maybe a month." The anger in his expression immediately shifted to concern. He crossed the room in 3 quick strides, pulling her into his arms without hesitation. "I'm so sorry. What can I do? Do you need to take time off? Should I call the best oncologist in the city?" For a moment, Sophia allowed herself to sink into his embrace to draw comfort from his strength and warmth. But then she remembered the scene outside Victoria's perfectly crafted words, the reporter's hungry eyes. "I saw the news," she said, pulling back to look at his face. "The reporter's downstairs. Victoria." Alexander's jaw tightened. "That's what I was trying to call you about. Someone took photos of us last night on the roof. They're already online, and Victoria—" He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "She flew in from Paris this morning ostensibly to support me during this difficult time. She thinks I'm using you. She knows you're not. This isn't about you, Sophia. This is about her trying to manipulate me back into a relationship I never wanted in the first place. But she's right about one thing," Sophia said quietly. "I am far beneath your social station. I am just a maid who got lucky enough to catch a billionaire's attention. Don't," Alexander's voice was sharp, "don't let her poison you with that garbage. You know who you are, and it has nothing to do with your current job or your bank account." "Do I? Because right now I feel like I'm drowning, Alexander. My mother is dying, my life is falling apart, and now I'm apparently the other woman in some billionaire love triangle that I never asked to be part of." Before Alexander could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and swore under his breath. "It's my grandfather, the head of the board." "Answer it. Sophia, answer it. You're already in enough trouble because of me." Alexander held her gaze for a long moment, then reluctantly answered the call. "Grandfather." Even from across the room, Sophia could hear the raised voice on the other end of the line. Alexander's expression grew darker with each passing second. "I understand your concern," he said finally, "but my personal life is not subject to board approval." More shouting. Alexander's knuckles were white where he gripped the phone. "No, I will not be attending dinner with Victoria tonight. And no, I will not be reconsidering our engagement." The call ended abruptly, leaving them in tense silence. "Let me guess," Sophia said. "Marry Victoria or lose control of the company." "Something like that." Alexander's voice was carefully controlled, but she could see the storm brewing in his eyes. "My grandfather believes that my recent erratic behavior indicates I'm not fit to lead Blackwood Industries. The board is meeting tomorrow to discuss replacing me as CEO. Because of me, because of them, because of a system that values appearances over substance, connections over character." He moved toward her, his expression intense. "Sophia, I need you to know that whatever happens, whatever they threaten, it doesn't change anything between us." "Doesn't it?" She backed away from him, her heart breaking with every word. "Alexander, be honest with me. If you lose the company, what happens to those injured workers you promised to help? What happens to the scholarship program you wanted to start? What happens to all the good you could do with that kind of power and money? I'll find another way. Will you, or will you spend the rest of your life fighting to get back what you lost, becoming exactly the kind of bitter, ruthless person you were before we met?" The question hung in the air between them like a blade. Alexander's face went pale, and Sophia knew her words had hit their mark. "You think I should choose the company over you? I think you should choose the greater good over one person's happiness, even if that person is me. And what about your happiness? What about the life we were starting to build together?" Tears were threatening again, but Sophia forced them back. "Some fairy tales don't get happy endings, Alexander. Sometimes the princess has to walk away so the prince can save the kingdom." "This isn't a fairy tale, Sophia. This is real life, and in real life, I get to choose what matters to me. And I get to choose what matters to me. She moved toward the door each step, feeling like it might kill her. I won't be the reason you lose everything you've worked for. I won't be the reason you become someone you'll hate. Sophia, wait. I'm going back to Queens, to be with my mother, to figure out what comes next. She paused at the door, not trusting herself to look back at him. Thank you for everything you've done for me, for seeing something in me worth saving. But this, us, it was beautiful while it lasted, but it can't last. We both know that. I love you. The words stopped, her cold hitting her like a physical blow. She closed her eyes, memorizing the sound of his voice, saying those three words, storing them away like treasure. I love you too, she whispered. That's why I'm leaving. And then she was gone, fleeing toward the elevator before her resolve could crumble, before she could turn around and run back into his arms and damn the consequences. Behind her, she could hear Alexander calling her name, but she didn't stop, didn't look back, didn't let herself think about the devastation she'd seen in his eyes. As the elevator descended toward the ground floor, toward the reporters, and the chaos and the life that waited for her outside, Sophia Martinez felt something inside her chest shatter beyond repair. She'd found love and lost it in the space of a week, had touched something beautiful and perfect, and had to let it go. But even as her heart broke, she knew she'd made the right choice. Some loves were too dangerous to keep, too costly for everyone involved. Some loves required sacrifice, and sometimes the greatest act of love was knowing when to walk away. What she didn't know was that Alexander Blackwood was already making plans of his own, already deciding that some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the cost. What she didn't know was that their story was far from over, and that sometimes the greatest love stories were the ones that survived the worst storms. But for now, as the elevator reached the ground floor, and the doors opened onto a world that suddenly seemed impossibly cold and gray, Sophia Martinez walked away from the only man she'd ever loved, carrying his heart with her and leaving her own behind. 3 weeks. 3 weeks since Sophia had walked out of Alexander's penthouse and out of his life. 3 weeks of silence, of checking her phone obsessively for messages that never came, of forcing herself not to Google his name or look at the business news that might tell her whether he'd chosen duty over love. 3 weeks of watching her mother fade away like morning mist. Maria Martinez had been moved to hospice care 2 days ago, and the small room at St. Francis felt nothing like the sterile hospital ward they'd grown accustomed to. Here there were flowers on the windowsill, soft music playing quietly in the background, and a sense of peace that Sophia found both comforting and terrifying. Mija, her mother whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle hum of the oxygen machine. You look terrible. Sophia managed a weak laugh, smoothing her mother's gray hair back from her forehead. Thanks, Mama. You really know how to make a girl feel good about herself. I'm serious. When was the last time you ate something? When was the last time you went home and slept in your own bed? I'm fine here. I'm not leaving you. Sophia. Maria's eyes, though clouded with pain medication, were still sharp with maternal authority. You cannot save me by destroying yourself, and you cannot punish yourself for falling in love. I'm not. Don't lie to your dying mother. It's bad karma. Maria's lips curved in the ghost of a smile. Tell me about him, about Alexander. Sophia's throat tightened. There's nothing to tell. It's over. Because you ended it, or because he did, because it had to end, because some things are more important than personal happiness. Like what? Like the good he can do with his company, like the people who depend on him, like your pride, Maria interrupted gently, like your fear that if you let yourself be happy, it will somehow be taken away. The words hit too close to home. Sophia looked away, unable to meet her mother's knowing gaze. I raised you to be strong, Sophia, but I never meant for you to be so strong that you couldn't let anyone else carry some of the weight. Maria's hand found hers, fingers intertwining with surprising strength. That man loves you. Real love, the kind that changes everything. And you love him the same way. Love isn't always enough. No, it isn't. But it's a hell of a good place to start. Before Sophia could respond, there was a soft knock at the door. Elena Rodriguez, the hospice nurse, peered in with an expression that immediately put Sophia on alert. Sophia, honey, there's someone here to see you. He says he's from Stanford University. Confusion flooded through her. Stanford, but I already told him I wouldn't be returning this semester. Elena's expression grew more puzzled. He says he's here about a scholarship. Full ride, all expenses paid, including medical costs for family members. He says it's something called the Martinez Foundation. The room spun around Sophia like a carnival ride. The Martinez Foundation, named after her, which meant, "Send him in," Maria said before Sophia could object. The man who entered was tall and distinguished with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He carried himself with the easy confidence of academia, and his smile was genuinely warm. "Miss Martinez, I'm Dr. Robert Chen, Dean of Students at Stanford University." He shook Sophia's hand, then turned to Maria with a gentle nod. "Mrs. Martinez, it's an honor to meet you. Your daughter is quite remarkable." "Yes, she is," Maria agreed, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Tell us about this foundation, Dr. Chen." "Of course." Dr. Chen pulled out a folder thick with documents. "The Martinez Foundation was established 3 weeks ago by an anonymous donor with the specific purpose of providing full educational support for exceptional students facing family medical crises. The foundation will cover all tuition, room, and board, and additionally provides up to $2 million in medical expense coverage for immediate family members." Sophia's hands were shaking. $2 million. Enough to give her mother the best possible care, the experimental treatments they'd never been able to afford the chance at more time together. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why me? Why us?" The donor was very specific about the criteria. They wanted to support a student who had demonstrated exceptional academic achievement, personal sacrifice for family, and unwavering moral character in the face of adversity. Dr. Chen's smile widened. "You were apparently the perfect candidate. Who is the donor?" "I'm afraid that information is confidential. However, I can tell you that they've also requested to fund your transportation back to California, temporary housing near the university, and a personal care assistant for your mother throughout her treatment." Maria squeezed Sophia's hand. "It's him, isn't it, your Alexander?" "Mama, this is exactly the kind of thing a man does when he loves someone so much he'll move mountains to make sure they're taken care of, even if he can't be with them." Dr. Chen cleared his throat diplomatically. "I wouldn't know about that, but I can tell you that the donor seemed very invested in your success, Miss Martinez. They've requested regular updates on your progress and have indicated that funding for the foundation will continue indefinitely to help other students in similar situations." After Dr. Chen left, Sophia sat in stunned silence, staring at the scholarship documents that represented everything she'd ever dreamed of and more. Her mother watched her with knowing eyes. "He's giving you everything," Maria said softly. "Your education, my medical care, a future you never thought you could have. And he's asking for nothing in return. Because he knows I can't give him anything in return. This doesn't change anything between us. Doesn't it? A man doesn't create a foundation in your name unless he's planning to be part of your life for a very long time, or unless he's saying goodbye in the most generous way possible." Maria was quiet for a long moment, studying her daughter's face. "Sophia, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If I weren't sick, if money weren't an issue, if you could have any life you wanted with no obstacles, would you choose him?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sophia felt tears threatening again, hot and insistent. "Yes," she whispered, "in a heartbeat." "Then maybe it's time to stop letting obstacles make your choices for you." Chapter 1. That evening, alone in her mother's hospital room while Maria slept, Sophia finally allowed herself to do what she'd been avoiding for 3 weeks. She Googled Alexander's name. The first headline made her blood run cold. "Blackwood Industries CEO faces board revolt." The second was worse. "Alexander Blackwood stripped of executive powers." The third shattered her completely. "Billionaire's downfall, how a maid destroyed an empire." With trembling fingers, she clicked on the articles, each one painting a more devastating picture than the last. The board had voted to remove Alexander as CEO, citing erratic behavior and poor judgment. His grandfather had publicly disowned him, cutting off his access to the family trust. Victoria Ashford had given an exclusive interview calling the whole situation a tragedy that could have been avoided if Alexander had simply chosen his responsibilities over his infatuation. But it was the final article that broke her heart completely. A business journalist had somehow gotten an interview with Alexander himself, and his quote was burned into her memory. "I regret nothing. The woman I fell in love with taught me what it means to have a conscience, to put people before profit, to fight for what's right even when it costs everything. She's worth more than any company, any fortune, any empire, and if I had to choose again, I'd choose her every single time." Sophia closed her laptop and buried her face in her hands, sobbing with a grief that went beyond her mother's illness, beyond her own heartbreak. Alexander had lost everything because of her, just as she'd feared he would. And instead of hating her for it, he'd created a foundation in her name, ensuring her future, even as his own crumbled around him. "Mija!" Maria's voice was weak but alert. "What's wrong?" Through her tears, Sophia told her mother everything about the articles about Alexander's sacrifice, about the impossible choice between love and duty that had destroyed them both. "He gave up everything for me," she finished, her voice broken. "His company, his fortune, his family, everything." "No," Maria said firmly with more strength than Sophia had heard from her in weeks. "He gave up everything for love, for the chance to become the man he was meant to be. And you, mi amor, you're going to give him the same chance." "Mama, I can't. He's lost everything because of me. He's found everything because of you. Don't you see he's free now? Free to build something new, something better, something that's actually worth having." Maria struggled to sit up, her eyes blazing with fierce determination. "And you're going to help him do it? How? I don't have anything to offer him. I'm nobody." "You're the woman he loves. You're the woman who taught him how to love. You're the woman who's going to Stanford on a full scholarship to study economics with $2 million in medical funding and all the time in the world to figure out how to change the world." Maria gripped Sophia's hand with surprising strength. "You're going to go to him and you're going to tell him that fairy tales don't end with the princess walking away. They end with the princess and the prince building a new kingdom together. But what if he doesn't want me anymore? What if too much has happened? Then you'll find out. But Sophia, listen to me." Maria's voice grew urgent, prophetic. "I won't be here much longer. Weeks, maybe days. And when I'm gone, you're going to have to live with the choices you made while I was still here to guide you. Don't let me die knowing that my daughter was too afraid to fight for the love of her life." The words hit Sophia like a physical blow, but they also ignited something inside her chest, a fire she thought had been extinguished 3 weeks ago. Her mother was right. Alexander had sacrificed everything for love, had chosen her over duty and obligation and family approval. The least she could do was be brave enough to find out if there was still a chance for them. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll go to him. I'll find a way." Maria smiled, the expression transforming her gaunt face into something radiant. "That's my girl. Now there's something else I need to tell you. Something I should have told you weeks ago." "What?" "That young man of yours. He's been calling the hospital every day for 3 weeks asking about my condition. He's been anonymously paying for my private room, my pain medication, my care. Elena told me yesterday that he's the reason I'm in this hospice instead of dying in some overcrowded ward." Sophia's heart stopped. "What? He never stopped taking care of us, Mija. Even after you broke his heart, even after you walked away, he's been making sure we were okay. If that's not love, I don't know what is." The revelation shattered the last of Sophia's resistance. Alexander hadn't just created a scholarship and walked away. He'd been watching over them, protecting them, caring for them from a distance, because he knew she wouldn't accept his help directly. "I have to go to him," Sophia said, standing up so quickly she nearly knocked over her chair. "I have to find him and tell him." "Tell him what?" "That I love him, that I'm sorry, that I was an idiot for thinking I could protect him by walking away." Sophia was already reaching for her purse, her mind racing with plans. "That if he'll have me, I want to build something new with him, something better than what either of us had before." "Good," Maria said, settling back against her pillows with a satisfied smile. "But first kiss your mother goodbye." And Sophia, "Yes, when you find him and when you tell him you love him, make sure you also tell him that his future mother-in-law expects grandchildren. Lots of them." Despite everything, the grief, the fear, the uncertainty, Sophia found herself laughing. Mama, what I'm dying. I can say whatever I want. As Sophia kissed her mother's forehead and prepared to leave, Maria caught her hand one last time. Be brave, Misha. Love is always worth fighting for. Those words echoed in Sophia's mind as she stepped out into the New York night, determined to find Alexander Blackwood and fight for the love they'd both been too scared to claim. She didn't know where he was or what she'd say when she found him, but she knew one thing for certain: fairy tales didn't end with walking away. They ended with coming home. Finding Alexander Blackwood turned out to be harder than Sophia had anticipated. The penthouse was empty, sold to pay debts according to the doorman who remembered her. His office building was crawling with reporters and bankruptcy lawyers. Even Marcus, the security guard who'd always been kind to her, had been let go weeks ago. It was Elena Rodriguez who finally gave her the lead she needed. That man who's been calling about your mother, the nurse said when Sophia called the hospice at midnight, desperate and running out of options. He left a number for emergencies, said if anything happened to Maria, if you needed anything at all, we should call him immediately. Do you have that number? Honey, I'm not supposed to give out personal information. Please, Elena, I need to find him. It's important. There was a pause, then the sound of pages rustling. The number goes to a place called Phoenix Construction in Brooklyn. That mean anything to you? Phoenix Construction. Rising from the ashes. Even in his lowest moment, Alexander couldn't resist the symbolism. Sophia took the subway to Brooklyn, her heart hammering against her ribs, as the train carried her through the tunnel beneath the East River. She'd rehearsed what she wanted to say 100 times during the journey, but every version sounded inadequate. How do you apologize for breaking someone's heart while they were trying to save your life? How do you ask for forgiveness when you're not sure you deserve it? The address Elena had given her led to a modest building in Red Hook, nothing like the gleaming tower where Alexander had once ruled his empire. The sign by the entrance was simple black letters on white: Phoenix Construction, rebuilding tomorrow today. Through the glass doors, she could see a handful of people working at simple desks, the kind of no-frills setup that spoke of a company built on determination rather than inherited wealth. And there in the back corner, bent over architectural plans with his sleeves rolled up and his hair falling across his forehead, was Alexander. He looked different. Thinner maybe, with lines of exhaustion around his eyes that hadn't been there a month ago. But there was something else, too, something lighter about his posture, more relaxed. Like a weight he'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted from his shoulders. Sophia stood frozen outside the door, drinking in the sight of him until a woman inside noticed her and gestured toward the entrance. The moment Alexander looked up and saw her through the glass, time seemed to stop. He stood slowly, his expression cycling through surprise, hope, and something that might have been fear. For a long moment, they just stared at each other across the distance. Two people who had loved and lost and found their way back to the same moment. Then Alexander was moving, crossing the office in quick strides, pushing through the door to reach her. Sophia. Her name on his lips was a prayer, a question, a benediction. What are you doing here? Looking for you. Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. I heard about everything. The company, the board. I'm so sorry, Alexander. This is all my fault. No. His voice was fierce, immediate. Don't you dare apologize for any of that. Losing Blackwood Industries was the best thing that ever happened to me. How can you say that you lost everything? I lost nothing that mattered. I lost a company that was built on exploitation and greed, a family that valued money over love, a life that was slowly killing my soul. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. Sophia, I've been free for the first time in my life. Free to build something that actually matters. Phoenix Construction, we rebuild homes destroyed by natural disasters, create affordable housing for low-income families, employ people who've been written off by the traditional construction industry. His eyes were shining with passion, with purpose. It's everything I should have been doing all along if I hadn't been so busy playing the role of the ruthless billionaire. The Martinez Foundation was selfish, he interrupted. I created it because I couldn't stand the thought of you struggling, couldn't bear knowing that your mother might not get the care she needed, because I hadn't been brave enough to fight for us when it mattered. Tears were threatening now, hot and overwhelming. You've been paying for her hospice care. For everything. How did you? Alexander's expression shifted. Elena, I asked her not to tell you. Why would you do all of that and not tell me? Because I love you. The words were simple, absolute. Because even if you never wanted to see me again, even if you hated me for destroying your life, I needed to know that you and your mother were taken care of. It was the only thing I could do for you that you couldn't refuse. I don't hate you, Sophia whispered. I could never hate you. Alexander, I love you so much it feels like drowning sometimes. I love you enough that I thought I had to let you go to protect you, but I was wrong. I was so wrong. Were you? His voice was careful, guarded. Because nothing has changed, Sophia. I'm not a billionaire anymore. I can't give you the life I thought I could. I'm just a guy who owns a small construction company and lives in a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. Good. The word came out fierce, immediate. I don't want the billionaire. I never did. I want the man who stayed up all night researching experimental cancer treatments for a woman he'd never met. I want the man who gave up everything he thought he wanted to become someone he could actually respect. I want you, Alexander. Just you. For a moment, he just stared at her, hope and disbelief warring in his expression. Sophia, I'm going back to Stanford, she said quickly, needing to get all the words out before she lost her nerve. The scholarship you created, I'm going to accept it. I'm going to finish my degree, and then I'm going to come back here and help you build Phoenix Construction into something that changes the world. You'd do that. Give up the opportunities you'd have in California, the career you could build there. I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing everything I've ever wanted. She stepped closer, close enough to touch him, her hands trembling as she reached up to cup his face. I'm choosing love over fear, hope over safety, us over everything else that doesn't matter. Your mother gave me her blessing, told me that fairy tales don't end with the princess walking away. Sophia's voice caught on the words. She's dying, Alexander. Soon. But she wants to know that I'm going to be happy, that I'm going to build a life worth living. Alexander's hands came up to cover hers, his touch warm and sure, and everything she'd been missing for 3 weeks. Are you sure? Because Sophia, if you do this, if you choose me, I'm never letting you go again. I'm going to love you and fight for you and probably drive you crazy with how much I want to take care of you. Promise. I promise. I promise to love you when you're brilliant and when you're impossible, when you're changing the world and when you're barely holding it together. I promise to be your partner in everything business life, the occasional spectacular argument about proper wine storage. Despite her tears, Sophia found herself laughing. That was one time and you deserved it. I absolutely deserved it. And I probably deserve this too. Before she could ask what he meant, Alexander was sinking to one knee right there on the sidewalk in Brooklyn, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Sophia Martinez. He said, his voice steady, despite the tears in his eyes. You destroyed my life in the most beautiful way possible. You taught me what it means to love someone more than power, more than money, more than my own fears. Will you marry me? Will you help me build something better than either of us could create alone? The ring was perfect, simple, elegant, nothing like the massive diamonds she'd seen Victoria wearing in magazines. It was exactly what she would have chosen for herself, which meant Alexander had been paying attention to more than just her arguments about wine storage. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, of course, yes. Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook only slightly, then stood and kissed her with all the passion and promise and desperate love of two people who had found their way back to each other against all odds. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sophia became aware that they had drawn an audience. The employees of Phoenix Construction were clustered in the doorway, watching through the glass with broad smiles and obvious approval. They seem happy, Sophia observed. They've been listening to me mope about losing the love of my life for 3 weeks. They're probably just relieved they won't have to hear any more pathetic sighing during board meetings. Board meetings. Very small boards, mostly discussions about which coffee to buy for the break room. Alexander's smile was radiant, transforming his entire face. It's a different kind of empire, but it's ours if you want it. I want it. I want all of it. The company, the one-bedroom apartment, the pathetic sighing. I don't do pathetic sighing. You absolutely do, pathetic sighing. Elena told me you called the hospital every single day asking about my mother in what she described as the most heartbroken voice she'd ever heard. Alexander's cheeks flushed slightly. That's not pathetic sighing that's concerned inquiry. It's pathetic sighing, and it's perfect, and I love you for it. They were interrupted by the sound of applause from inside the building. Through the glass, Sophia could see Alexander's employees cheering someone, popping what looked like a bottle of champagne. Should we go inside? She asked. Meet the team. In a minute. Alexander pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. I need another minute of this being just us before we share it with the world. Just us, Sophia agreed, closing her eyes and breathing in the scent of him, the warmth of him, the impossible reality of him. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other on a sidewalk in Brooklyn, while the city moved around them, two people who had lost everything they thought they wanted and found everything they actually needed. Sophia, Alexander's voice was quiet, thoughtful. When this is all over, when we're married and Phoenix Construction is changing the world and your mother is... He paused, struggling with the words. When she's gone, Sophia finished gently. When she's gone, and it's just us figuring out how to build a life together, are you going to regret any of this? Are you going to wonder what would have happened if you'd chosen differently? Sophia opened her eyes, looking up into his face with all the love and certainty she felt blazing in her chest. Alexander Blackwood, she said firmly, I spent 3 weeks thinking I'd made the noble choice by walking away from you. 3 weeks of being miserable and proud and completely wrong about everything. The only thing I would regret is not fighting harder for this, for us, from the very beginning. Even though I'm not the man I was when we met, especially because you're not the man you were when we met. The man you were when we met would never have created a foundation to help strangers, would never have given up his empire to build something that actually mattered, would never have spent 3 weeks calling a hospital to check on a woman he'd never met because he loved her daughter. Sophia reached up to trace the line of his jaw with her fingertips. The man you are now is everything I fell in love with, and everything I never dared to hope you could become. Alexander captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. I love you, Sophia Martinez, and I can't wait to see what we build together. I love you too. Now come on, I want to meet the people who are going to help us change the world. As they walked hand in hand toward the door of Phoenix Construction, toward the beginning of their new life together, Sophia felt something she hadn't experienced in months, pure, uncomplicated happiness. It had taken losing everything to find what really mattered, but they had found it, together. And sometimes that was how the best fairy tales ended, not with a return to the castle, but with the building of something entirely new, something better, something that was entirely their own. 6 months later, Sophia Martinez graduated from Stanford University summa cum laude with a degree in economics and a job offer waiting for her at Phoenix Construction. Maria Martinez lived long enough to see her daughter walk across that stage, long enough to hold her first grandchild, a little girl with her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn chin, long enough to know that her daughter had chosen love over fear and built something beautiful from the wreckage. And in a small office in Brooklyn, surrounded by people who believed that business could be a force for good, Alexander and Sophia Blackwood continued the work of proving that sometimes the best way to win everything was to be willing to lose it all for love.